again, everyone. Welcome back to episode 2 of Purple Noon. I'm Stephanie Conti, and I'm here with my waifu, Savanna Lanausse.
Bonjour, everyone. We gotta get into the theme.
Bonjour, she says as she eats croutons with Caesar dressing.
It's my movie snack.
So, I can't get over that. Seriously? Croutons? Croutons are expensive, dude.
No, if you from Publix, it's like $1.50, and then they sell like little Caesar packets for like 69 cents. So,
oh my god, are you gonna next time we go to a movie theater? Is that what you're gonna be smuggling in?
Of course, I kind of, it kind of just ran into me one day. I didn't have a lot of snacks, and then at the movie they had little things of Caesar dressing. So I'm like, you know what? Let me try it. And I went. What was I? I was going to see Onward, Disney, and that's kind of how I got into my snack. So,
it's just that one song from Ratatouille playing as you're mixing, like "Les Fonds, playing as
that's how I feel while eating it. That's how I feel.
Oh my god. Okay. So, quick announcement before we get into our review. So, we figured out an upload schedule. So, what works best for not only us, but I think everyone, even despite what's going on in the world right now, everyone's free on the weekends. That still doesn't change. So, our upload schedule is going to be Fridays and Sundays at noon. So, that is what we plan. It'll be both released on my website, audemicmedia.com, and on YouTube. So just a little update. So even though this will probably, I don't know when this is going to be put, maybe it'll be on Sunday, maybe Sunday is when I'll start it. But if not, the new schedule will start next week. So just keep in mind, Fridays and Sundays at noon is when the new audio goes up.
Yay.
Now, for today, we have a little movie comparison. We're doing a little double whammy today. And that is we're going to be comparing The Talented Mr. Ripley to Purple Noon. So for those of you who didn't know, both movies are written by an author named Patricia Highsmith, and they're both based off the book The Talented Mr. Ripley. Despite that, we are not going to go over how true either story remains to the original book and series. I will say little things here and there relating to Patricia Highsmith, but overall, this is just going to be a comparison to Purple Noon and Talented Mr. Ripley as movies, as well as giving our own individual review without the comparison as well. So we're not going to be discussing the book and how much it matches to either movie. That's not what we're here for. We're here to compare movies, which one is worth it, if they're both good, if they're both bad, whatever it may be. We're the judges in that. So I'm going to tell you first about Purple Noon. So Purple Noon was the first one of the adaptation of the book to come out. And it came out in 1960, directed by Renee Clement. Stars include Alain Delon as Tom Ripley, Maurice Ronet as... Oh, wait, hold on, because they changed the names. No, he's Philip.
Yeah.
He's Philip in the movie, because in the other movie, he has a different name. Maurice as Philip and Marge as Marie Lafleur as Marge. So that's Purple Noon. And I also have, so that is available on the Criterion channel. Once again, not a sponsor, but would love to be. Criterion peeps, hit me up. Purple Noon is a part of the Criterion. And as I mentioned in the last episode, it's how we both started getting into Criterions. It was my first film that I ever picked up in the Criterion collection. And it was the first Criterion I ever showed Savanna. So on the Criterion, for anyone who is curious, if you want to know if it what the DVD comes with, because all of their DVDs come with 5 hours of bonus features, essays, and stuff like that. So what this one comes with is Blu-ray special edition. The one I have is Blu-ray. It's new restoration monaural. Yeah, monaural soundtrack. Not mono. Yeah, forget it.
It's all right. It's all right.
There's interviews with the director Renee Clement, a bunch of archive interviews with Alain Delon, and even Patricia Highsmith. So for those who don't know, Patricia Highsmith actually got to see Purple Noon, but she died before The Talented Mr. Ripley came out. So I'll talk about when we start doing the review. I'll give a little taste of what Patricia Highsmith thinks of Purple Noon as an adaptation for it. But
I
yeah, and
heard
it
a
also
little
comes
bit
with
of her opinion.
yeah, it's a little we'll get into that because it's a little I was a little surprised when I read her opinion on it. I wasn't expecting her to think that. But anyways, the DVD comes with also a booklet with like a ton of essays and stuff like that. So that is what the DVD comes with. Now, Savanna, why don't you break down The Talented Mr. Ripley for us?
All right, guys. So, The Talented Mr. Ripley came out in 1999. So, it's maybe 40 years after the original came out. It stars Matt Damon, Gwyneth Paltrow, Jude Law, and Kate Blanchett. Matt Damon is the lead. So, he is sort of opposite to Alain Delon. And it's directed by Anthony Minghella. And this one, I did some research a little bit before I rewatched it for the second time. And it was interesting to me because what the director wanted to do was sort of highlight what Patricia Highsmith said about Purple Noon and sort of take her criticism and put that into the sequel. So I thought that was like an interesting take instead of doing, because I don't think sequel should be a carbon copy or remakes or anything of the first one, because I feel like a lot of people do that, and it's sort of like Disney's The Lion King. They just took it and put fancy animals. Nobody liked that. So
yeah,
I think that
better than cats.
Oh, please. I think I respect a lot what the remake, if you will, did, and I think we'll get into that.
Okay, so let's first. I think this can be handled best if we first talk about each movie individually as their own without the comparison.
Yeah.
So I saw Talented Mr. Ripley for the first time yesterday. I had seen bits and pieces of it, and I knew about it, of course, but I really didn't get to see where the differences was and how this movie stood alone on its own. And watching it, I enjoyed it. I definitely did enjoy it. The editing style I thought was really nice, and there's a really nice jazz element into it. And by the way, like at some point I will announce, like right now we're just talking about little facts about the movies. I'll let you guys know if there's a spoiler coming up, and if you want to skip it.
I think we're gonna have to get into spoilers once we start comparing them, because there is very big differences between the movies.
Absolutely. So for right now, this little portion is going to be spoiler free, as well as our overall review of Purple Noon. So if you do either want to see one of these films before that you haven't seen, your ears are safe now. But later on, I will let you guys know when spoilers are coming out.
Yeah, we'll do a little warning. So Stephanie, I think we should kind of. What do you think of Purple Noon on its own? I think we should kind of start like that.
Purple Noon on its own, I think, is a fantastic film. And it had to be for me. I really do think it's a fantastic film because it was the film that made me dive deeper into the Criterion. Like I was like, whoa, this film was exceptionally well. I want to see what else Criterion has. So it was good enough for me to explore what other titles that the Criterion had. I really did enjoy it. I picked it up on a whim in Barnes & Noble several years ago. And even when I rewatched it today, it's still held up for me. That's how good of a movie I think it is. It's still held up in every aspect that I thought it was good. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I do feel like it's one of those exceptional movies. And, people may say it's slow and it's boring, but I've always found it almost suspenseful. And I think that's where the movie sort of draws you in. And obviously, Alain Delon, he did a superb job at being Tom Ripley. And I think we'll get more into that. But Purple Noon is probably and I said my last episode, it's one of my favorite movies.
Mm-hmm. It really is overall a great film. I think it hits, whether it's acting, directing, storytelling, pacing, I think it just hits everything right on the mark.
The cinematography is beautiful. The cinematography is fantastic.
So both stories take place in parts of Italy, and both films are beautiful, but I gotta say, Purple Noon, that's where we'll get into that. We'll get into that. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Oh, we should also highlight that Purple Noon is in French. I don't think we said that.
Yeah, okay. No, we have not. So, Purple Noon is French and Italian, so it has parts where they speak in Italian, but Talented Mr. Ripley is an American film, so it's American with a little bit of Italian here and there. So right. English and a little bit of Italian.
Because I think it's important.
I do want to point out. Oh, no, you go.
Sorry, no. I just wanted to say, I think it's important that we highlight it's a foreign film, because I know people, like, hopefully we can open you guys up to that, but I know people who, like my husband doesn't really care for foreign films, or it won't be their first pick per se.
Subtitles is something it does take a little bit to get used to. Not everyone adapts to it super quickly. But honestly, for me, like, I haven't seen every foreign film, obviously. I've seen a good decent amount in my life so far. And once you, I'd say, reach after like the fifth or seventh foreign film that you watch, it automatically just, like, when watching it and reading the subtitles, it's not as hard to follow along anymore. Like, it's very natural. Like, even like I noticed that while watching Purple Noon, I'm like, wow, like I was able to just read the subtitles and still view it, and like it felt as if for me there's no difference from watching an English film.
Yeah, definitely.
So if you're scared of that, don't be afraid. It takes a little bit at first, but we live in a streaming age, so you can always pause and you can always rewind and stuff like that. So don't ever be afraid to dive into foreign films, because they really, really are fantastic.
Yeah, for sure. It opens you up to a whole new world of film.
One thing that annoyed the hell out of me, that bugged me, I was looking at the actor Maurice Ronet in
Oh my God, I have an
Purple
opinion
Moon.
about him. I have an opinion.
Hold on. Tell me this dude doesn't look like Martin Sheen.
Yes, but
He looks exactly like Martin Sheen, and it bugged me the entire time.
Stephanie, that's the problem, right? Because they're supposed to be like 25. Why does he look 37? Why does he look like their dad in the film? That's the
true.
one thing, my one critique of Purple Noon. They're supposed to be like right out of college, and this guy looks like their father.
But
And
I was looking at him, and I'm like,
yeah,
crap. He looks like Martin Sheen. Like, it was
the
just
French
one of those
Martin
things I couldn't
Sheen.
get over. Yes, I could not get over it. But okay, so what do you want to dive into first? Do you want to? Okay, let's talk about Talented Mr. Ripley. How we thought of it as a movie on its own. What's your opinion?
I think it's a decent movie on its own, but when you compare it to Purple Noon, it is a different take on the story. And I feel like people that have seen Purple Noon are either gonna feel about it or gonna love it, gonna love the different sort of take on it. I personally, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to just real quickly say, no, you're good. So even though we're still getting used to this, guys.
Sorry, we're like cutting each other off every 5 minutes.
It's fine. But what I wanted to say was, even though both movies are very different in their own way, they still have the same plot synopsis. And the plot is that Tom Ripley is a talented mimic, moocher, forger, and all-around criminal improviser. But there's more to him than he can even guess himself. That is the plot for both. It's just both of them deviate in their own ways. So when you're watching the both, do not expect a drastic, like, I wouldn't expect, it still feels like the same movie, just adaptations of each other, which they are. So yeah. I think with the Talented Mr. Ripley, I think it's a good movie for its time. I think in the 90s as a blockbuster, it's good. But that's how I view it, a blockbuster. I don't view it like, a cinematic masterpiece. I don't feel it. It's like it doesn't resonate with me as much as the original did. So it's not a bad movie by any means, but to me, it's just a movie. It really is just a movie, just a blockbuster. That is the best way I can say it. It's entertaining. It's got good people. It's got good actors. It's got some nice editing, great music in it, but it didn't win me over as much as Purple Noon did. And I think with that, now we can get into the nitty gritty. I think now we can get into the comparison.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, would I recommend both? Absolutely. Do I recommend one more than the other? Yes. If you were going to watch any one of these, I highly recommend Purple Noon. And Savanna, do you agree? Do you disagree?
Oh, I completely agree. So I'll get into a little spoiler. The Talented Mr. Ripley takes more of a psychotic look at Tom Ripley, where Purple Noon is more of the con man, smart, cunning version.
Yes.
And the reason I personally didn't like the psychotic one, I do feel like it takes away a lot of the mystery and the smartness of Tom Ripley that Alain Delon had. What do you think?
And I felt like I totally agree. And one of the things I had wrote down, because I wrote down a big old list of things, how I felt for either film. I felt like the Talented Mr. Ripley, Purple Noon, the friendship from the get-go feels real. that was the one thing I think really hinders Talented Mr. Ripley,
Yeah,
was
it
that
felt
we
like in
knew it was
the Talented
fake.
Mr. Ripley.
And
Yeah, and
and
it
Purple
felt like
Moon. No, you're good. I want to hear what you got to say. Tell me, tell me, tell me.
no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I feel like I feel so bad. I'm like cutting you off. No,
You're
I was
good. We're
basically
just
gonna
so
say,
hyped.
yeah, we love this movie. Like Purple Moon is our favorite. But I was just gonna say, in The Talented Mr. Ripley, it definitely took more of a in-depth look at their friendship. But the friendship, like, how do I say this? Tom Ripley felt like a bother. Like he was like he says in the movie, a
Yep.
leech, and you can feel that. You could feel the uncomfortableness, the fakeness. I don't know. It just didn't. It took away a lot of what the first movie had, which was like a real sort of friendship.
Yeah.
But you
And
don't. Yeah.
the relationship between Tom Ripley and Philip. So in Purple Noon, he's known as Philip, the character, but Jude Law plays the same character, but in The Talented Mr. Ripley, the character's name is Dickie. So Philip, I feel, in Purple Noon was more of a bad guy. Like when things started to hit the fan, you rooted for Elaine Delon, where with
Yeah.
Matt Damon, you didn't. You didn't, because it felt wrong from the get-go.
I couldn't agree more. I felt, and that's why I love the one positive. I mean, I have a few positives about The Talented Mr. Ripley, but my favorite thing was Jude Law, because I felt like that is sort of the character that should have been portrayed. Not only was the Philip Greenleaf Purple Noon, well, he looked 39, but like you didn't like him. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying that Dickie in Talented Mr. Ripley was better, but like he was portrayed as a young kid that was just spending daddy's money. And you could kind of like, okay, like he's not a terrible person on purpose. But I think I'll get into a spoiler here. Also, the one thing I like that kind of showed the darker side of his character in Talented Mr. Ripley, they show the scene where the Italian woman drowns herself, where in Purple Noon they just talk about it. And I personally like that
Yes.
scene because it did put in the fact that, okay, he's not a great person. And also, yeah, so you're kind of like, well, maybe we won't root for him, but I don't think it's enough where Purple Noon had it. What do you think?
I completely agree. I don't think this, and I'm not saying by any means that Matt Damon, Jude Law, and oh man, what's her name? Gwyneth Paltrow. Gwyneth Paltrow are not good actors. I am not saying that at all.
No.
I just feel like the portrayal that they had of these characters, like I will admit, I didn't even like Marge in Talented Mr. Ripley. I liked her role more in Purple Noon than in Talented Mr. Ripley. And I think one of the things too, that the actors were great in both films. Actors were great, but the writing and what they wrote for the characters in Talented Mr. Ripley, I felt was weak. And it was kind of all over the place, especially for Tom Ripley. You had this character who went from, being from the get-go, he's not good. He's a con artist. This. And you just see this evil demise of like him trying to take advantage of a situation. But he doesn't know what he wants in The Talented Mr. Ripley. But in Purple Noon, he does. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, it took that. The best part about Purple Noon is it kept you guessing. And Alain Delon was so likable, and you felt like he was smart. There's scenes where he's like forging signatures. But in The Talented Mr. Ripley, it's more of a insecure, talented, passionate rage he had.
Yeah, and I'm going to just dip into this for a second. I do believe, because there's always been, question up in the air. I full-heartedly believe that The Talented Mr. Ripley does have some gay themes to it.
Oh.
And that is, it's obvious. It's not said, but in my opinion, it's definitely obvious. But Purple Noon doesn't have that. Purple Noon doesn't have an ounce of that.
And
so
I have something to say about that, because I think
go.
Patricia Highsmith did come out and later say that there was sort of this gay tension between them. The only thing I would say about Talented Mr. Ripley, I'm happy they kind of went in that direction, because that is what it's true
That's
to
what
the
Patricia
novel,
wanted.
but I think they did it to where it's almost distracting. And the scene on the boat is a passionate rage, but that whole passion aspect, that whole like tension between them, it takes away from the con man. So I feel like they chose that over the con man, which I really, really wish they didn't.
And I think like there could have been a way, like if I really felt like if they wanted to explore maybe Tom Ripley being gay in The Talented Mr. Ripley, if they did that, it would only make sense in my eyes if Philip or Dickie was a prideful gay man that maybe he was jealous of, that, you know, in that sense. Or there could have been more, instead of it being a con, it could have been more of a jealousy thing, like jealous of his not only wealth but his confidence, the fact that he can have anyone and anything. And I feel like, and especially with the Peter character in The Talented Mr. Ripley, that's when too, like at first you were like, is there a little, is Ripley gay, like with him and Dickie? But it really solidifies, I think, in Peter. And now this is where we're going to get spoilers. Now we're going to talk about, so if you don't want to hear any more spoilers, clock out, watch the films, and come back and join us. Okay?
Yeah.
So, Savanna, how do we feel about Peter? I have thoughts about Peter. And my thought is I didn't like the character Peter.
I thought he was extremely unnecessary.
It really, like at the end, I was like, dude, make up your mind. Like it doesn't seem like someone would go that far for not knowing what they wanted.
It was just, I'm going to be honest, there are a lot of scenes in that movie that are just borderline weird. And I feel like they use, and I'm going to go back to the whole, the gay thing. I feel like they use Tom Ripley's sexuality as sort of part of his, like, him being psychotic. Because if you notice, there's a lot of scenes where he's like sniffing Philip or Dickie's jacket in the train. Like, it was just like, they were made to make you uncomfortable. Portrayal. Exactly. And that's sort of a negative part about that movie.
The good things I will say about Talented Mr. Ripley was I'm a jazz fan, so I really enjoyed the themes of jazz that they added in. A lot of Chet Baker, and Chet Baker is one of my favorite jazz musicians. So that just appeals to me. I really like that addition. Jude Law was fantastic. I think he made a better Philip. He really is. He sold that character he was playing, he sold it better than Maurice in Purple Noon. I will give Talented Mr. Ripley that. Jude Law absolutely killed it. But when it comes to our central character, Tom Ripley, I totally think Alain Delon nailed it more than Matt Damon.
Alain Delon. But Alain Delon, how do I put this? What's the saying? Men want to be him, women want him. That's not the saying, but you know what I mean. Like, no, he has that.
That matches. Yeah,
he has that persona of like he's the good guy. He's the sort of anti-hero. Where Matt Damon's Tom Ripley, even though I think he did a great job for what he was given, it didn't quite make the mark.
Which also, I do want to say something. Because you know me, I always go on IMDb, and I'm always looking up facts while watching a movie. So I paused Talented Mr. Ripley, and I'm looking up facts. How the hell did it say that Matt Damon lost 30 pounds to play Ripley? And this is 90s Matt Damon. So I was like, what? How?
I don't know. I don't think it was his first film either, right?
No, he had done, because what? Talented
Good Will Hunting. He was in Good Will Hunting before that. Yeah, I don't know what that was about. Maybe he gained a lot of weight.
That's just a factoid that, like, I was like, what? Like, that completely blew my mind. But also, another thing I do appreciate of The Talented Mr. Ripley was that both Jude Law and Matt Damon actually learned how to play those instruments for that movie. I appreciate things like that. So that was like a little sweet morsel for the movie for me. The bath scene. That's just the one thing I read. Can we talk about the bath scene in The Talented Mr. Ripley? It was gay. I mean, we could say it. It was gay.
Uncomfortable.
It was uncomfortable because it felt like a predator and prey situation, not like a romantic scene. It literally felt like
It wasn't a
Matt Damon
romantic
wasn't
scene. It wasn't.
lusting. It felt like it didn't feel like Matt Damon was lusting for Jude Law in the movie. It felt like it was a hunger. And that was, I mean, that's good to unsettle. Like, I enjoy how unsettling it was, but it didn't fit for that movie, in my opinion.
No, and then, the boat scene, the famous boat scene in both movies is kind of where, spoiler, Dickie slash Philip gets killed.
Yes.
And the one thing I didn't like about like the talented Mr. Ripley, I like how it starts. I kind of do like that Dickie did tell him, like, hey, like, I'm done with you. You're too much. Because I think at some point that needed to be, like, confronted. But
Yeah.
Matt Damon goes on this rant about how they're supposed to be together and how are you going to marry a girl, where he's talking about marriage 3 months. And just, he goes on this crazy rant and then eventually kills him. And I didn't like that because it's coming. Like, they made it very obvious in that scene that, like, one person's going to get off this boat. Where in Purple Noon, they had the element of surprise almost.
Yeah, because you weren't expecting. You thought, because in Purple Noon, what happens is Alain Delon's as Tom Ripley, he gets stranded. So because the character Philip wants to sleep with his girlfriend, because all three of them are on a tiny boat. And so what he does is he pushes Alain Delon onto a dinghy and sets him out to sea. Now, he was supposed to be dragging him, but the rope gets cut, and so he's just abandoned out to sea for, I don't know, God knows how long. And I liked that as the push, because in that situation, it was you had Alain Delon on this boat for God knows how long, like almost like brewing his anger and what he was going to do. He had time to think. He had time to plan. It seemed like a more concise decision when he did do it. Even though it was a surprise to us, it didn't feel like a surprise to him. And I liked that element. And I thought it was a bigger push than Jude Law telling Matt Damon, like, oh, you're boring and stuff. I thought Purple Noon had a better push, like a better breaking point for Tom.
And I feel like, Purple Noon was smart. It's so smooth.
Yes.
Alain Delon was so smooth. They're playing chess. And I think they even joke about, like, Philip brings up the point where, like, oh, like, you're going to kill me. Like, they're joking about it. And, he's very smooth, and all of a sudden it's a relaxed thing, and then bam, he, like, hits him off the boat. So it's such an intense scene, and I feel like
and the way that scene was shot was amazing. Like, they're all on a real boat. There's no CGI back then. So they are on this boat. They are filming. They are rocking back and forth, and they're still doing all of this. There's no one else, sailing that ship except Alain Delon and the actor on there. And it feels so real, and you can see how difficult it is. Whereas with talented Mr. Ripley, it was just like, oh crap, this happened. So now I'm just stuck on a little dinghy with my dead lover.
We have to talk about how the talented Mr. Ripley made Tom Ripley a serial killer.
He did. Whereas Purple Noon, it wasn't a serial killer. It felt more of a revenge. I think and I feel like revenge is not a good word. How would you explain the difference between the killings in Purple Noon and Talented Mr. Ripley?
In Purple Noon, it felt like a necessity. It felt like in order to achieve what he was doing, which was being a con man, conning everybody, sort of stealing somebody's life, he had to murder. But in the Talented Mr. Ripley, it felt like the character didn't know what to do and would freak out and kill.
Yeah, like he felt Matt Damon was pretty spastic. Like, he wasn't as cool, calm, and collected as Alain Delon was, and I think that was what was needed. Now, that's not how it might not be in the book, but I feel like for the movie and as just these two movies alone, I felt like Purple Noon just works better plot-wise.
It's hilarious, though. It's hilarious, though, because Alain Delon he'll kill somebody and we're like, yes, do it. You have to. It's good. And then Tom Ripley in The Talented Mr. Ripley will kill somebody and we're like, ew.
We're like, what the hell are you doing to Peter? Peter has nothing to do with this.
Yeah, so it's like, I feel like the audience also shifts as the differences. You kind of shift in your position with the movie, which I also think is interesting. And I think that's why you should watch both.
Yes, absolutely. Like, I totally still, at the end of all of this, even though we're not bashing, but, we're ranking Purple Noon higher than Talented Mr. Ripley, I highly recommend viewing both and definitely coming back and seeing what we have. And then also on either YouTube or on, like, we love talking about movies. So if you've seen both of these and if you have your opinions, if you think that we're wrong, tell us why. Like,
Yeah.
I'm so into hearing like opinions and stuff like that and how people feel about movies. Um, and also so I feel like with the killings, Purple Noon did it better. And I think one of the things that the talented Mr. Ripley misses out on was the fact that he was a con artist from the get go. Like, it was a higher level. Tom Ripley
Yeah.
and talented Mr.
Yes.
Ripley was a higher level, already skilled, already knew impersonations and everything. Meanwhile, we see that transformation with Elaine Delon. You don't get to see that transformation, and I feel like if we had that transformation, I think it would have just been a lot better. Like, when Elaine Delon is in the hotel room and he's tracing over the signature over and over again, like, there's like a sense of like, wow, like, there's like a sense of like, holy
Right.
crap, he did it.
Yeah, and there's also a sense of respect for the character that I feel like we don't have with Matt Damon.
Matt Damon's sloppy.
Matt,
He's sloppy.
He's neurotic. The character is neurotic. But I did want to move on to another character. How do we feel about Marge?
I didn't care for Gwyneth Paltrow. Not because she's a bad actress in that movie, but just because she became a nuance. Like, in my opinion, if someone is going to kill and take over that lifestyle, like in Purple Noon, it makes sense. Then not only does he want uh, the lifestyle of Philip/Dickie, it would make sense to me that he wants his girl too. And that's where I think also Purple Noon exceeds more, because the role of Marge, I feel, enhances Purple Noon but hinders the talented Mr. Ripley.
I completely agree. And I felt like Marge in the first film was sweet, not like it, but more innocent per se. Like, and
Yes.
she was kind of desperate to find out what happened to Philip. Where like they kind of made Gwyneth Paltrow more like naive, maybe the word is, and just like you said, like she's just there in the movie.
I know exactly who she reminds me. She felt like a knockoff Blanche Dubois from Streetcar Named Desire, or at least that's how I feel like they were intending to make her.
Yeah.
This really weird damsel in distress that I think didn't work. I think it works in Purple Noon, where she is a character who is naive, but plays a role in the story, because after, it's like after Tom Ripley and Talented Mr. Ripley kills Dickie, what's next? There's no what's next. It's just covering up the tracks. Whereas Purple Noon, it's now I get the girl.
Yes.
It feels like
yes,
like a stepping stone in the story that Marge is, rather than a hindrance to the story.
I also did like the little like manipulative romance. I know that's bad to say, but
Yeah.
it did really fit with what you're saying, that like that was his next move. This is going to be really nitpicky and maybe there's no validity to it. I didn't like the way, it's not Gwyneth Paltrow's fault per se. I didn't like her lines. I didn't like her dialogue in the movie.
No, I didn't care for it either. I felt like, and even some parts of it, I felt like it was somehow, for even a newer movie, it felt a lot cheesier. It felt like an older cheesy movie.
Yeah,
for being a 90s film.
Things like when Philip pays you attention, it's like having the sonnet. Like, okay, no, we don't need to do all that. Like, and even in she felt very modern in Purple Noon, and I felt like they did take that away from her a little bit in The Talented Mr. Ripley.
Purple Noon definitely, because despite being a 60s film or in a 60s setting, all the characters in Purple Noon seem timeless, and at some point in their character scheme, they seem relatable. Whereas Talented Mr. Ripley, it doesn't feel like that at all. It feels like an adaptation of a book. It doesn't feel like a movie on its own.
Yeah.
And you know who else? I didn't care for Cate Blanchett in Talented Mr. Ripley. You threw in a curveball lady, and it's like, whoa, your eyes are on the wrong prize, dude. You should be getting with Marge.
It hurts my heart because she's actually one of my favorite actresses, but she was definitely like, I feel like they put her in there just to show like how crazy Matt Damon could be, because she kind of starts off the movie like he lies to her. He's like the first person, that he lies to is her.
No.
And
He
I feel like
lies to the
that's the
father
purpose.
first. Do you remember he lies to
Oh,
the
that's
father
right. That's
first?
right.
So it
That's
started like
right.
within
But
the
he's
5 minutes.
So I don't know. Then never mind. I was trying to justify her purpose, but yeah, I don't. There was nothing. There was nothing for her to. And I love her. I'm so sad, but like, I
It was
didn't
just
find
an
a purpose
additional
for her
curveball.
either.
Like her and Peter were curveballs, but meanwhile they already had Freddie. Freddie was a nice curveball.
But here's the thing: I don't know what's in the book, so I don't know if those two characters were actually in the book or not. Because I understand the element of like, but it still didn't feel necessary to the central plot. Even if it's in the book, it felt like that character, I don't remember her name, and Peter were separate to whatever was going on. It didn't feel like the same movie, if that makes sense.
It didn't. And I felt like also that is why both movies are the same length, but Talented Mr. Ripley feels a lot longer than Purple Noon.
It does.
It feels a lot longer. And like I said, like Talented Mr. Ripley, it's a good blockbuster for its time. It's
very good on its own.
It's got good qualities.
Yes.
Very good on its own. But when you compare it to Purple Noon, when you compare it to what it could have been, even in the 90s, what it could have been for its time, and taking that adaptation, I think it would have been a lot better if they kind of stuck more to the plot line of Purple Noon. And if they wanted to deviate it, I think if they wanted to keep those gay elements to it, I think it would have had to been like they had in my opinion, what would have worked if they wanted to keep that theme in there, that underlying theme, was if Philip or Dickie was a bisexual character.
Yeah, I feel like
because he was out there and proud and stuff like that, I think that's where Tom could have really been more jealous in.
Yeah, I feel like if they, with the underlying, homosexual themes, I feel like if they changed it up and not made it one of his negative, attributes, I feel like that could have been better. But again, I would like to look at them as two separate movies based on one book. They're both really good. I did want to go back to something we said in the beginning. Stephanie, you said Patricia Highsmith actually commented on the original. You want to explain what was said?
Yeah, so Patricia Highsmith said that she loved Alain Delon in the original version, but that she hated the editing, which to me, it didn't make sense. Meanwhile, so they try to take that and they try to adapt her comment about the editing into Purple Noon, into Talented Mr. Ripley. And I like the editing, but it really didn't make a drastic difference to the actual story, in my opinion. It didn't enhance the film greatly.
No, and I don't know, I feel like with authors looking at I think that's hard too, because when you have your work envisioned and then somebody else sort of makes it their own, it's always hard. I get authors have their own opinion, but I really don't understand what she meant by the comment. What do you think that meant? Because to me, the movie,
she said that it wasn't concise editing, I believe was like the exact word that she used. It wasn't concise. Meanwhile, it didn't, to me, make any sense, because I think the editing, I mean, if she wanted more of that time, like a James Bond style editing, I could see that, especially in the beginning and in the end and maybe during some murder scenes. But if Purple Noon had a different editing style, I feel like it could have possibly cheapened it.
I agree. I definitely agree with that.
Is there anything, okay, so we already talked about, plot-wise and stuff like that. Now, soundtrack. I love soundtracks. For those of you who don't know, I collect film soundtracks. I love soundtracks. Even though I really appreciate the jazz themes of The Talented Mr. Ripley, I felt like it was completely lacking in audio, because in my opinion, there was no original score. It didn't feel like there was one. It was just popularized Chet Baker and of that time jazz songs. Whereas Purple Noon, composed by Nino Rota, was just fantastic. I felt like the audio in The Talented Mr. Ripley came too much to be a plot point, rather than enhance the feel of the film. So I think that's where another Purple Noon takes that too, because I feel like the audio and the soundtrack of it definitely are enhance the film so much more than The Talented Mr. Ripley. What are your thoughts? Did you notice that with the audio?
Yeah, I agree. I like I said, I do. I mean, like I agree with you with the whole jazz theme. I do think that's really fun, and it gives the movie sort of a unique theme. But Purple Noon, the score fits so well. I feel like when you have a character like Tom Ripley, when you have characters in the movie like that that are so unique and different, and are doing all these things, you need to have music that sort of what's the word? What's the word I'm looking for? Highlights the character.
Yes.
Makes you feel something for the movie, what's going on. And The Talented Mr. Ripley, the jazz themes made it really cool. It made you in with the times, but it didn't enhance the plot or the characters. So I agree with you on that. I think you hit it right on the nose.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think overall, Talented Mr. Ripley, where it exceeds is definitely Jude Law. I enjoyed its editing style, but it really didn't add much. I thought, overall directing was pretty good, and the acting was good too. But where it lacked was in comparison to Purple Noon, it really stepped back in terms of how good the plot was. And for me, Purple Noon, I just think is an overall classic. I think it's super underrated. I don't know many people who talk about Purple Noon, especially all the filming that they did out sea was just amazing.
Yeah.
And I think also the characters are more written or more well. Hold on, I got this. Are better. There we go. Better than the characters are in Purple Noon. Are more realistic, well written, and overall, I just like them a lot more than Talented Mr. Ripley, except for Dickie. Dickie would be the exception.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. I did want to say too, Alain Delon. I think Matt Damon's a great actor, but Alain Delon does steal the show on this one, and he's going to be coming up a lot on this podcast because he's in a lot of Criterions. So we're going to be talking about him a lot, and I think he's a fantastic actor, and hopefully, like, we get to talk about his different characters and why he always steals the show, in my opinion.
I think he's just really good. It's one of those things. I think he's a good actor because I think he's really good in terms of the subtlety of things, like whether it's in Purple Noon, in Le Samurai, or in Eclipse. I think he really nails the realistic subtleties.
He's a very relatable character.
Yeah, and like everything that he plays, and I think he's very, very realistic in every role or almost every role that he's taken that I've seen of him in.
For sure.
So if you had to rate Talented Mr. Ripley and Purple Noon on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like Interstellar, 1 being Pixels with Adam Sandler.
That's our scale for this podcast, guys. That's it.
Pixels to Interstellar. How would you rate Talented Mr. Ripley?
By itself, I would say a 7.5. It's definitely a good watch. It's
entertaining.
It's a great movie night, like with your friends. It's a great movie for that, and it has a lot of great details. It has a lot of really entertaining characters. Purple Noon is a 9.5. I'm not giving it a 10 solely because of the Philip character and the fact that he looks 40. But it's definitely Purple Noon is the winner on this one, clearly.
I definitely agree. I think Talented Mr. Ripley is entertaining, enjoyable to watch still, despite our criticisms. I think it's just it feels like a lot of heavy criticism because we know what it could have been compared to Purple Noon. Mm-hmm. But if I had to rate it, I would probably give Talented Mr. Ripley a 6.5, 7.
Oh.
6.5. I'm solid on 6.5 now. 6.5.
I feel generous.
I would give Purple Noon, though, probably an 8. I think.
Oh, okay.
I feel like I can go higher. I feel a 9 doesn't feel right, but an 8.75 feels just. So I would give it an 8.
Specific.
Yes, an 8.75. because I enjoy it. I really like it. It's something I would continually see over and over again. Like, it's definitely, like, within the first time I've seen this, I've probably watched this movie at least 3 or 4 times since seeing it originally. But it's not right in my top 10, but it's definitely is, like, a movie I highly recommend to anyone. I think it's I just think Purple Noon is a classic. I think it's a classic. Not in my top 10, but for sure Z's a classic.
All right.
All right.
Those
Any
are our
weird
scores,
comments you want to
guys.
talk about? Any weird things you want to mention about the talented Mr. Ripley? We mentioned the bathtub.
Oh yeah, that was. I mean, I mentioned the part where he was like sniffing him on the train. I didn't think that was.
That was weird. That was weird. And Philip Seymour Hoffman was just a little too over the top.
He was too involved in the movie. Like, I'm just gonna say it. It's a little too much.
But yeah, and then also, like, another thing too I noticed was that the way the characters were introduced were so different. Like, they introduced Freddy within the first 10 minutes of the film. Meanwhile, it took like half an hour.
But Freddy was a bigger part in The Talented Mr. Ripley, I felt like.
That's true. So it did feel like they were kind of saving that build up for Freddy. Because I think, with Purple Noon, with Freddy, it was like, oh yeah, he's just a guy that you didn't know was going to be involved in this. Meanwhile, in Talented Mr. Ripley, it was like they isolated him. You could see Matt Damon go, who is he? And like things changed. So I definitely think they meant to isolate him as a important character. Cate Blanchett, I can't. I was not her best work by any means. And not a well-written character for her at all.
Oh, sweet Kate. I love her, but yeah, you're right. That wasn't her finest moment.
I'm just looking and seeing if I have any more comments. Oh, one more thing. Let's talk about the police. How dumb were the police in Talented Mr. Ripley, and how smart were they in Purple Noon?
Dude, the police were a joke in the remake.
They were like, because I liked the added pressure, the police. Meanwhile, the police, like in Purple Noon, but in Talented Mr. Ripley, it was just like, oh, there are some more dudes I get to fool. And it felt.
It's not realistic. It's not realistic.
Yeah. Meanwhile, you have the inspector in Purple Noon waking up this dude at like 6 a.m., coming in and like just going, something ain't right, and like scaring the crap out of Tom Ripley in Purple Noon. Meanwhile, in Talented Mr. Ripley, you already have a little skittish, Matt Damon, and this dude is not getting anything right, and Matt Damon's still freaking out. And it was, I didn't like how the police were portrayed in Talented Mr. Ripley.
But they cracked the case. They didn't feel in Purple Noon.
Yes, they do. They felt like a joke in Talented Mr. Ripley. It just felt like another plot point to boost Ripley's ego.
Yes.
Which could have been Patricia Highsmith's point, but for the movie, I just didn't care for it.
I also have a fun fact. We can end with that.
Ooh. Okay.
The director, Anthony Mangello, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, for Talented Mr. Ripley, he actually wanted Tom Cruise to play Tom Ripley.
Oh.
He was his first choice.
Ooh.
I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know.
90s Tom Cruise. How did he look? He would have looked even older than Matt Damon.
Yeah, because he was in his 40s, I think, when that came out.
I think late 30s, like mid to late 30s.
Well, remember, they're supposed to be like 26, 25, like the latest. They're supposed to be really young.
Well, let's be real. Alain Delon don't look... I think it's just because they don't make men who look like that anymore. So maybe that's why I can't distinguish if Alain Delon in that movie looks 18 or 32.
He was like 23, or he was really young in that movie.
He was very young in that movie. He was, younger than what the character was.
Yeah.
But, I mean, they don't look it sure as hell, Maurice playing Philip.
The dad.
God.
Yeah, no. Nah.
Marge was casted well. Like,
she looked young.
I will say both.
Yeah.
For both movies, I think Marge was casted well, but the character just wasn't as good as in The Talented Mr. Ripley as Purple Noon.
I don't think that's anybody's fault. I just think what they were given,
Yeah, no, I wouldn't blame Gwyneth Paltrow on it for anything. Paltrow? Paltrow. Paltrow. But, yeah, I think... Also, another little fun fact. So, Purple Noon, the French translation is, and I'm not French, so I'm going to butcher this, Plain Soleil,
Ooh.
which is, I think it's full sun.
Yeah, it's sun.
It's full sun. It's full sun. I thought it was purple noon, just translated, but no, it's full sun.
So do you know where purple noon came from?
I'm thinking it had to be a part of like a sentence in it, but that could be something that we can look up, and
interesting.
that'd be cool.
I think we should end our podcast with fun facts. I feel like this is fun.
That's a good thing. I like that.
Yeah.
Let's see. Pacing is so much better in Purple Noon. Like I already said before.
Definitely.
Mr. Ripley just felt so wrong. I think that's it though. I'm good. I went through my entire list, my nonsensical list for each of them, and I feel like I've hit everything I want to say. Anything else you want to say?
Honestly, Stephanie, the only thing I really wanted to drive home on this podcast was the fact that Philip looked 39. That is really all I wanted to say. That is it. So I said everything. I feel very satisfied.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, you've heard it from us. Both we recommend watching, but one is way better than the other. So go watch both, tell us what you think, and enjoy. So thank you guys so much for listening, and we will talk to you soon. Bye, guys.
Bye.